Welcome back from lunch. Let me update you on our revised schedule. And Nalini, I'm also going to ask you to come join us up here. So for our friends in California, we certainly did not want to cut short the discussion. It was a really rich discussion. So what we have done is we have revised our schedule for the rest of the day. And for those of you in the room here, it's just behind you. So we will proceed with a full hour for this panel discussion, which is about action planning, until 1:45. And then we're going to have an abbreviated introduction about the SPP values, sort of foreshadowing what we will get into deeply tomorrow. We will move in then to the evaluation panel from 2 to 3. That will be facilitated by Chuck, and have a quick 10-minute break from 3 to 3:10. From 3:10 to 4:10, then we will begin our concurrent sessions, and then we will have a 20-minute wrap-up. Okay, still ending on time. Okay, any questions before we begin? Terrific. And please let me introduce my associate, Corey Sutherland. She will be acting as translator to California. She will take your questions so that they can hear the discussion and the questions, and we'll speak them into the, whatever that device is. So if I could please just have the panelists quickly introduce yourselves again, then we'll get started.
Carrie Leroy, Washington. Leah Morgan, Ohio.
Bill Merritt, Maryland.
Steve Alexander, Portland, Oregon.
Corey Sutherland, Ocean Consulting.
Chad Nongle, Oregon.
Adrienne Free, Los Angeles.
Jill Boone, Santa Clara County.
Great. So I'd like to start, and everyone, these questions that are guiding our panel discussion will be found in your packet. They are titled Questions to Guide Panel Discussion Participation. So I'd actually like just to begin to open this up to anybody who's interested in responding, actually with the first question, which is about how your expectations of the planning process may have differed from the experience of the action planning process, and to talk with us about that. Anybody like to get us started with that?
Well, I can talk a little bit about my experience.
Please.
As many of the people here know, I was actually coming back from a fishing trip in Alaska and ended up fortuitously at the meeting in Olympia. So I really had no expectations. I didn't know what to expect starting from that point. Now, since then, I think we've moved along fairly quickly, bringing Chris on board from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and now our expectations are we really see this kind of exploding quite a bit in our state, in Maryland. And it's been a big help to have the people on the panel, or on the, in the sustainability project, there to help us. And it's just, you know, so I want to thank all you guys, and also all the other states, because you guys have been a huge help. Whenever we've run into something we can't figure out, phone call.
So Bill, you came into this really without a lot of expectation. So I'm curious for you or for anyone, what's been the most surprising part of this action planning experience for you?
Most surprising part?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I knew I was going to get, I knew I had buy-in from our top levels, you know, from the secretary and that level. I'm really surprised at the buy-in that I've gotten from the wardens. The wardens that I've gone out and spoken to, and I think Chris will agree to this, it's been, to me, it's been absolutely incredible. We have, Betty's been a huge help. She's from one of our facilities. She's a warden. And then also we have a regional assistant director for corrections in Baltimore who's been a huge help. And just to get the buy-in at that level was a little surprising that they're willing to okay, let's explore this, let's push this forward. So that's been a huge help for us.
Great.
I would even say just the board, I mean, Lieutenant Black,
Chris, speak up real loud.
I'm sorry, even their staff, the warden staff.
Right. Yeah, because,
Warden staff.
Even the warden staff.
Even the warden staff seem to be incredibly interested and are engaging us. In fact, pushing us a little bit to respond
Right.
to a lot. I mean, we get 1,000 emails a day, and I'm sure they do too, but the staff has been
Yeah.
incredible.
and we're
I mean,
talking.
I've
at-
been
Yeah,
dumbfounded.
we're talking at the correctional officer level. You know, not security chief, assistant warden. We're talking at the CO level, you know, that they're like, when can we start? When do you want us to start interviewing inmates? Yeah, they've been really pushing us along quite well.
So let me ask the panel, because one of the conversations that was occurring last night during the poster session was about, and Betty and I had this conversation about culture change as either a barrier or an opportunity, both within a corrections system, but also in an academic setting. So talk with me about those culture change issues. Maybe Steve.
As far as academic versus,
Well,
we had
so
a
how
kind
do
of a-
you change or get buy-in at that culture level in order to drive
Yeah, and
action
it's
planning
very-
forward?
Well, top support is critical. I mean, you got to have that support from your leadership. And Sheriff Staten really put that forth as a priority for our sheriff's office. And by doing that, it allowed us to kind of begin messaging to our staff. And then once you get the staff involvement on different, green team, on initiatives that you're introducing, and they start to see those results, and then they see some of the savings that's been created, it helps for that buy-in. And then once you get the buy-in, you can continue to build upon those small successes that you have to hopefully bring you not only awareness up among your staff, amongst the inmates, amongst the population that you work where you work at, is you're able to implement things that on a larger scale, and that's where we're headed.
Wonderful. Others commenting about this idea?
Yeah, I found out with the Department of Corrections in Oregon that just getting some sense of direction from some leadership or a point person to steer all the other facilities and get them online has really impacted the institutions and is starting to change the culture because they're instituting their green teams, and there's just, like we mentioned earlier, there's just a lot of buzz, and we're breaking down those barriers with that old style thinking culture.
Okay. And please, question back here.
I just wanted to add to what Steve and Chad were saying. It's one of the cool things for getting buy-in from the staff has been some of the good positive press we've gotten. So we've been able to sort of say, hey, we're doing this really cool thing with our jail program, and I think staff is usually there's negative press around what's being done in corrections. So this is an opportunity to actually sort of flip that story around and say, here's some of the good things that we're doing. And I think staff really responds to seeing, like, hey, it's a point of pride for people.
Wonderful. How many of you are engaging media as a strategy or tool in your action planning? Nalini, do you want to speak to that? Carrie?
Not specifically in action planning, but I think one of the things we learned early on in Washington was that the media can really be our friend. We also have to be really careful with the media, obviously, because it's so common and so easy to sensationalize or to belittle or to use that whole aura, the culture that people hold with prisons and prisoners, and then sort of take advantage of that in a negative way. But so I think that goes to education, and not just education of inmates, but education of the media and education of society, for that matter, of what corrections means to our society.
Yeah.
So that big picture is something that I think all of us are holding as important.
Absolutely.
I think it's very important.
Carrie?
Yeah, I would just add that we've received a lot of support from our DOC media relations team. We've gotten a lot more support from the DOC than, say, the Evergreen partnership. And that's been crucial. They've been able to give us all kinds of great advice. We have contacting the media, interacting with the media, protocols in the handbook, so take a chance to look at them. But realize and make sure your partners know that you can do your very best to communicate with the media, and they will still print what they want. Right, so we've had lots of our partners go, why weren't we mentioned? And we were like, we talked about you a lot, but you can only control the media so far. So really a few key points and hit them again and again and again, and then the piece will pop like you like it.
Chad?
have found out, and just, through utilizing our nonprofit organizations, they seem to have avenues outside through different organizations to get out the positive information and the impacts they're doing with the education and the opportunities inside prisons. Just here in the last month, we've had probably 3 or 4 different press releases. We just had one today about our sustainable gardening out at Deer Ridge and how it's impacted the community. So I think we can use those as avenues as our nonprofit organizations.
Well, so let's use that as a jumping off point. I'm really curious for you all to talk about how you are using existing networks of your partners or piggybacking on their efforts as part of your strategies and action plans. Anyone? Pardon me?
No, I was just trying to understand your question. For us, we've had a nice a relationship between our 2 departments, between the Office of the Sheriff and Facilities and Fleet. So we've played a lot off of that partnership. It's an internal partnership, but utilizing some of the relationships and the cost savings and things that come from that relationship to kind of get things going. So our focus is primarily on operations to begin with, but so that makes a lot of sense.
Great. Other examples or ideas?
We do a lot of cross-posting with our partners, so there's an active Facebook page for one of our key partners, and they post exciting things about what we're doing, and we try to post exciting things about what they're doing. And so I think the social media in particular is a really terrific avenue for positive stories, whereas the regular news media, as we all know, has a more stronger focus on negative news stories. And so I think we can really see if especially we band together and we get some expertise in social media, that might be a really great way for us to get the word out.
Nalini, and then
I guess this is more a question out to others about negative media, about negative feedback about our project. And I don't know about all of you, but I know that SPP in the past has, if you get an article in the paper, you're on the radio about the SPP, it's inevitable that you'll get 3 or 4 messages saying, these people belong in prison, they shouldn't be having education, they shouldn't be exposed to beautiful flowers. And, I've always gone to Dan to ask, what do we do about those kinds of comments? But I'd be really interested to know if there's some collective response we can give to those that's educational, compassionate, and works in terms of trying to diffuse some of these things that are maybe knee-jerk or just a cultural difference in terms of understanding what we're trying to do.
Well, I believe it's one of those things where you just know that you let them know and you message that the vast majority of these people are going to be members of the community once again in the future. And if we can prepare them to positively re-enter society and make a contribution as far as and kind of just head them down the right path, so that hopefully they don't return to the system. I mean, that's a solid message. I mean, that's really what I kind of talk about as far as that kind of messaging.
Yeah, I think we've addressed this, and we have a whole bunch of contract cities down in LA County. We service 42 of them, and addressing the city managers because they're all about bottom line and doing things as economically as possible. We emphasize the cost savings because recidivism rates. It's been shown that if you program them, educate them, recidivism rate's going to go down. Less cost overall for all of society. Then you have the cost to society for the victims. If you have even a 10% drop in recidivism rate, you're going to have that fewer number of victims in their communities. And then the safety issue. They don't assault each other when they're programming and they're educating and things like that. They don't attack staff. Our staff don't have to get involved in breaking up fights. I guess 30 or 40% of our force used is breaking up inmate-on-inmate fights. So for safety reasons, for cost reasons, and you can say, well, if we provide medical care, if we're not providing it to them now, when they finally get released on the street, we're going to have to provide it to them. It's a lot more expensive in that setting. So.
Thanks.
Corey, do you mind, let's ask our friends in California, they're in sort of an intense media market, what experiences that they have had with media?
California, are you there? Hello?
I'm not sure they're here.
Is anybody there?
Okay.
Should we call them back?
Just in the meantime, I just wanted to share, Sarah Patterson from Let Us Grow in Oregon just sent us sent me a link about the Madras Pioneer and a story that came out about OSU extension service and.
Can you hear us?
Oh, there they are. So anyway, they're just speaking that partnership role for spreading the word.
That's the article I was talking about, the new redone Madras.
Okay, great.
California, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Okay, yes, we can. We can. We were wondering what your experience has been with the media, with your sustainability projects.
Well, we've had elements of our sustainability project advertised in various forms. So one of the things that I didn't talk about earlier is we grow vegetation and materials for the Folsom Zoo. And so that's gotten in the press. Our worm farm has gotten in the press. Of course, all of our solar has gotten in the press. And California is wanting to embrace sustainability. What we've been reluctant to do is go forward and advertise the full program without first understanding what the program constraints will be for us. So we're really on the verge of identifying that we actually do have this comprehensive, holistic approach, not just these one-offs that are being championed by individual wardens and superintendents. And so we're pretty close on that. And I think the action planning process enabled us to realize we can take this in bite-sized chunks. We don't have to do it all at once. It really can be manageable in increments. And so we're excited about getting out there in the media, because we usually, when we're in the media, it's not for all the right reasons. So this is an opportunity to talk about all the positive things that are going on.
Great. Any other comments from the group or questions from the audience about media, social media? Please, Chuck.
So just out of curiosity, as a way to gauge, if a reporter was to come into this room right now with a camera and to interview, how many people would feel comfortable in being interviewed? See, that's really a good sign, because in a group like this, usually it would be much less than half. So I bring that up just in that sense that you never know when you're going to get a request, and you never want to say, I'll call you back tomorrow. You call today. And that preparation, and sometimes it's role-playing, sometimes it's even getting some training in dealing with the media. How do you look on camera? And there are programs out there, courses out there, and I really encourage people to do that so you're prepared before you get that call. And this group seems like it is prepared already.
I mean, Betty, you're a warden. You must deal with the media.
Yes.
Can you talk with us about your training or your experience with that?
Well, just in, with the media, it's just like you said, being prepared and just being able to share some of the things that the department is doing as a whole. And saying, responding to your question, one of the things that I focus on in working with their, and I call them returning citizens, is that they want to give back to the community. And in doing so, they're returning to our communities, and we have to let the people know that they're coming back, and this is what they're doing. They are giving back. They are giving back. So.
Returning citizens.
Returning citizens.
Okay, great. Please. No. I thought you held back beautifully.
So here's one last comment on the media, though, and I do think we have a pretty aggressive media office in general. Is the standard rule of thumb for our superintendents is that you don't want to meet your local reporter or your local editor at a time of crisis. You don't want to meet them then. So we've really tried to stay away from press releases, and as often as we can, invite the media in on anything that's of positive press experience. I mean, I know several reporters for the Seattle Times by name. I mean, if they saw me, they would call me by name. And the only reason we do that is you're just more prone to get a telephone call if they have an ugly story, and they will let you shape that article because you've built up some sort of trust or some sort of rapport. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the most important thing for us. I mean, we've experienced tremendous, I can't tell you how much media coverage we've got on sustainability efforts, but it's just a matter of, do you have a relationship with a local reporter, and can you talk to them? Because then when it goes bad, they typically will call you and talk to you, and there's some trust in there, and you can help shape the reporting, and that's where it's important to us. is one, you want to be out there positive all the time, but second to that, you want a relationship with the news organization so you can shape bad things. But you got to call them when bad stuff happens. You have to call them, as well as the good.
Can you talk about how you initiate those relationships?
You know, some of it is as simple as going down and meeting with editorial boards inside on an annual basis. Actually, Bernie Warner, who's not here today, we probably do an annual tour of press offices, and we just talk to the major news outlets. Sometimes he'll do op-eds where he'll really shape a story and share it with them like on a proactive basis. When I was the superintendent out at Stafford Creek, I literally met with him routinely, and then over the product of that, I got 9 front-page articles in less than a year. But it was just because we were out there and we went right to them. I mean, we didn't stand back. We went right to their offices. We talked to them, wanted to get to know them, wanted to bring them in and show them around, wanted to talk about some positive stuff. They get in and know some people, and you just got to shape it. I mean, you got to know them as much as you know elected officials, would be kind of the way I would frame it.
I know we're really moving around here, and I'll get right back to you, but I want to ask Jocelyn, so could the website be used as a repository for news clippings, for press releases, again, so that we're all not recreating?
Ouch. Whoa. Is it still working? Didn't blow it up. Yeah, definitely. And the existing website is the software for it is very similar to our Public Face website, and we have a press room on that Public Face website, so I imagine it would be very easy to have an archive there where we could pull pieces from each other's libraries. Yeah. And there's a media plan in the communicating with the media protocol in the handbook.
Fantastic.
An example.
One last comment.
One last comment.
Does this one work?
Just quickly, with national media, I often ask, may I review your copy before you submit it? Many times they're working on a deadline and can't. Works better with magazines and bloggers, but I always ask, do you mind if I review, just to make sure that everything is accurate? I wouldn't want you to get embarrassed by something that wasn't accurate. And they often will say yes, and they'll send me or call me with the quote.
Does this one work? The only other thing I would say is look for the hook. I mean, what's the hook? What makes it newsworthy? So Earth Day is a really good hook. Anytime you've done something for the first time, the first graduation, the first time you raise the salamander, the first time you do anything is a hook. So you got to look for the hooks too. Watch the national media if you can, or get on some national media Yahoo list or something so you know what's going on around the country. Because oftentimes it's national, then it becomes a local hook. So, I mean, people want to report on stuff, but there's got to be a hook in there, like what's going to make them report on it. So Earth Day, first time you've done something, 10-year anniversary, is there some buzz in the country around green energy? But you want to find just something that you can lay this thing on, because if you can do it, you can probably get someone to report on it.
Human interest.
Human interest.
And we did. We launched our Sustainable Jail project during Earth Week, and it was a whole big thing and had some real good coverage on it.
Yeah, and our media guys are saying if you could find a person who's been personally affected and benefited from your programmings, that's what the media is going to hone in on. They don't want to talk about your general recycling program. They want to talk about the individual who's been doing it and benefited from it.
So Carrie, I'm wondering if you don't mind sharing your thinking. You spoke to me last night about the idea of going beyond traditional television, newspaper, radio outlets to things like magazine publications, more of a national kind of perspective. Do you mind just kind of talking with us about your thinking on that?
I'm trying to remember our conversation. I mean, I think that as SPP and the network gets larger, we will be drawing more attention. I think there are disciplines across the country that might be interested, not just in studying the program. We actually had an anthropologist. We've been working with an anthropologist who's interested in studying us and what compels us to do this work, which is really fun. It's really fun to think about. it's a little odd to be the subject of study all of a sudden. But so he's then writing for Anthropology News, and so he's spreading the word about this program through really different groups of people. And so I think being, just kind of keeping that floating around in your head as you're having just conversations with other people, that because this SPP model reaches into, it's so interdisciplinary and it's reaching across so many boundaries. We have the opportunity to reach into criminal justice and social science and ecology and ecological restoration and science education. And all of those disciplines have media outlets, they have their own societies. We could be presenting at conferences. I think there's a lot more that we could do. And of course, anytime a magazine like, say, Conservation Magazine comes to you and wants to write an article, say, yes, of course, how can I help you? But I think there are lots of opportunities out there.
I'm curious, I'd just like to get a show of hands to get a sense around one of the issues that Dan brought up, which is how many of you are making routine annual editorial board visits? Okay.
I do it as part of my job, though, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so that might certainly be a tactic that we kind of want to think about, or even perhaps have some support for people to be able to make those kinds of visits. Please, Carrie.
One other thing I'd like to just mention is if, and we've been trying to do this more recently because we now have a network and we know more about what all of you are doing. If you do get an opportunity to talk with the media, mention that it's not just something in this location, but it's really a national movement. And I think that could compel other other states to pick something up more locally and contact. There could kind of be this ripple effect.
And just one last thing for me about the media, we've actually written some articles for trade journals. And so if for the Oregon, what was it, Association of Sheriffs?
Association.
Yeah, Oregon Sheriffs Association trade journal. It comes out quarterly. We actually wrote the article. That's not the same journalistic standards that the Oregonian would have, but it's a great way of getting your message out there to a particular audience.
Great.
Another tip from Washington is that if you want to put your SPP out in the social media and you don't feel like that's something you have time for or even like doing, that's another great place to hook into students. Students know social media and they can they can provide that kind of media presence for your project.
And speaking from my perspective, I would say don't forget about the money. You can talk about how little it may have cost to start something up, that it's a grassroots kind of thing, and you can also talk about any savings that you've actually achieved or that you expect to achieve.
Great. Any other comments or feedback about this piece, about media, social media? Okay. Let me ask, is it Leah? Mm-hmm. Leah, talk with us about, just because we haven't heard from you yet, what was the greatest challenge that your team faced in action planning? What was the biggest challenge for you?
Sure. The biggest challenge we had when we got back and started to look at the action plan, there's so much that we couldn't do without all of our partners at the table. So we knew we wanted to focus on bringing some kind of endangered species and animals and raising things into the facilities. But until we had a partner, we had no idea what kind of animal we're looking at. Are we talking about a beetle or a salamander or a bunny? And so, our first draft of our action plan was really, really generic of, find a space in the facility, find a staff support member, identify funding, really generic things, until we actually got the partners on board who could tell us what projects they wanted us to work on, what kind of funding needs we might actually have, how much it was going to cost. So I think our biggest challenge was really, we couldn't start well until we had everyone at the table.
So you started with sort of a general infrastructure needs, and then the partners helped inform the sort of content?
Yeah, I think if you look at kind of the drafts of our action plan, our first one was super generic, and by the time we had, Andy on board, we had very specific goals and objectives and amounts of money that we needed to raise, and we could get a lot more specific, but there were a lot of iterations of the action plan because we didn't have those partners from the beginning.
So let's talk for a minute about partners and partnerships, because that was a big piece of the feedback we got in the pre-workshop survey was about developing collaborations and partnerships. So if folks in the panel or people in the audience, and Corey, perhaps you can ask our folks in California, what challenges or opportunities that they have had in developing partnerships.
California, are you still there? Hello?
Okay. So anyone else? Panel.
Go ahead, Betty.
One of the challenges that we had in Maryland was getting
Hi, can you hear us?
outside agencies to come in and work with the offenders.
Yes, just 1 minute.
That was a challenge for us. A lot of the outside agencies who weren't aware of the population, they were a little skeptical about coming back and coming into the facilities. So that was one of the challenges we had.
And how did you allay their fears or reassure them, or what did you do?
We started out with the tours, giving them a tour and letting them know that, yes, offenders are people too, and just educating them on the safety and different protocols that we follow in ensuring the safety. Yes.
Great.
Do you want California?
Sure. California, hello?
Hi. Was the question what was our greatest challenge in developing an action plan?
No, it was your greatest challenges in identifying and establishing partnerships.
That's the part that we put off. As I mentioned earlier, we don't think that's going to be such a problem because we have a lot of academic institutions nearby our prisons that are already engaged with us on a number of efforts. What's probably going to be more difficult is we believe that the local facilities, the local wardens, the local superintendents need to establish those relationships with the communities. And so we need to figure out how to bring in each of the local representatives to create teams at those institutions that then can reach out to the local. So that's probably going to be the challenge, because we want to solve this locally, but still have this statewide umbrella that they can have some structure around.
I was going to say, in the case of Utah, I think one of the things that we learned about in terms of challenges with working with our partners is sometimes the disconnect between sort of the agency or institutional philosophy or situation with the actual human beings that you're working with.
Say more about that.
So, for instance, with Craig and Steve and Alan, who is the corrections institutions folks, those are the people at DOC to whom we were assigned to work with. And we presented our case, and they completely understood it. They facilitated. We went back and forth. We've just been working and working for months. But there's an institutional layer that lies above us, certainly, and them. And so there was this time, a period of when we were trying to work together, and we knew that we connected at this sort of personal, professional level, but there was an obstacle in terms of something that was greater than the both of us. And I'm sure that happens with other institutions. For instance, the Nature Conservancy is another of our conservation partners that are at a sort of the staff level. There's buy-in, there's eagerness toward, yes, we need this endangered plant grown, but because the institution is very careful about with whom they make sort of connections and MOUs, we haven't been able to get full buy-in. So I think that we all have to be aware that on whatever institution we are either not from, or it could even be institutions we are from, like your liability question that your provost raised for you, that there might be a hesitancy or a barrier that's imposed by the institution that isn't really about the professional or the staff people you're working with. And by understanding that, being mindful of that separation, I think it allows you to maintain the trust that's so necessary in forming these partnerships, but at the same time recognizing when there's, you can't beat through that barrier.
So for those of you that maybe perhaps have not had a champion in that world like Dan,
right?
What have you done?
So this is Tom Kay. I'm with the Institute for Applied Ecology. So I'm one of these partners that wants to participate with prisons. And so it's been an interesting process to try to establish lines of communication with prison facilities and DOC in general. And at first it was pretty opaque. You know, somebody like me who's coming from the outside, you know, the only thing I know about prisons is what I've seen on TV. You know, I'm extremely naive. And so I'm coming into a situation where there are acronyms, there are layers of administration, there are people that I have no knowledge of. And so it's a steep learning curve to try to understand who do you talk to and how do you gain entry into working with this a culture that you're not familiar with. So that's been really interesting, and I think the first workshop we had in Olympia was really important to facilitate dialogue with people in the DOC administration in Oregon. But before we got there, we just started working with an individual prison and with an individual staff member. And I wasn't even sure if that staff member had informed people further up. You know, I wasn't sure how low under the radar we were flying just to get something started. And so I had to ask him, you know, we're going to put something on our website about this. Is that going to be okay? Or is that going to raise some eyebrows because the people haven't heard about this yet? And it turned out, yes, you know, we've been talking and everything was copacetic. But so understanding how much acceptance of the activity there is in the facility and with the organization was an open question for us, and finding the right people to talk to. And now the doors seem to be opening up, and it's way beyond our capacity to respond to at this time. So now it's going to be about funding. But it's been an interesting and very educational process.
Please.
I just wanted to add something, which is that I would describe the challenge there as being kind of how do you move the conversations and the interest into actual action and partnerships. And it sounds like it comes from both you know, if it's coming from like the agency or the jails, or from, you know, partners that are interested in it. And so how do you have that dialogue where you really understand each other and the needs? But one of the interesting things that happened in our project was that I ended up getting a kind of a group of volunteers from our Master Composter program that are interested in helping to advise and stuff. And at the same time, one of the officers in the program knew that we had an old relationship with one of the nurseries. And the next thing we knew, that he'd recreated that from internally. He'd recreated that relationship, and they'd gone down there and they were donated like $2,000 worth of plants by the nursery, and the nursery offered to support the program. So, you know, it's sometimes it just happens, and sometimes you know, you have to kind of work at it and figure out how do you have those conversations happen in a way that the needs of the jail or the prison are being met, as well as you know, the interest of the volunteers. So
yeah, please, Jocelyn.
So this is sort of a general comment that comes from conversations I've had with Carrie, and also the description that Leah gave this morning. That often creating these partnerships is just a matter of making phone calls and asking questions and offering and saying, what are you looking for? And being okay with usually those, they don't pan out. I know at SPP Washington, we advance on all fronts, or no, we don't. We explore all fronts all the time. And then there's that moment, like Leah said, when it clicks, and sort of like what Jill was saying too, and then that's the partnership you go with. So I feel like it's really great to just keep your feelers out all the time. And then I think you know when okay, this is the partnership we move forward with, because you'll feel that resonance, and then you know it's beneficial to both, and you go.
And can I
add to that?
Please, Leah.
You know, one of the things I think was most helpful for us when we were doing a lot of outreach and sending emails to people we had no connection to was having the SPP materials. We sent them links to the New York Times article and to your blog, and it made it so much easier to convey the vision and what we were really looking for. And having those materials from you all made a huge, huge difference. It made it look a lot more legitimate. And we could also send our very generic draft action plan and say, this is what we're looking to fill in, and this is very, you know, serious. So that helped.
Hey, one other suggestion I might have is to take advantage of local associations, particularly correctional associations. If it's sort of the same admonition that I give to vendors who try and figure out how to crack the corrections code, and how do I get in to talk to somebody? And the analogy I make for them is, if you want to fish, you go where the fish are. And virtually every state in the union has a state correctional association, a professional association, somebody that's an affiliate of something. And they are constantly looking for exhibitors, and they are constantly looking for workshops. Look them up on the web. You'll find them in your state, and just offer. And, you know, a lot of times they'll draw 200, 300, 400 people to a conference, and maybe you get a half a dozen stop by your booth. You only need one to come and look and see what you got. There's a number of opportunities like that, and it's really pretty easy to ignore an email or not to get back to a phone call. But if you're right there and you've made the effort to come to them, you've already taken that step forward that makes it a lot easier for the corrections folks to reach back at you.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that, Tommy, but to transpose it to the other worlds that we're involved with professionally. So in terms of the world of corrections, yes, there are meetings, there are journals, there are all kinds of ways that corrections people communicate with each other, and we should enter there. But in the world of ecology, where a lot of the restoration and captive rearing projects, ecology and conservation is also a world that has annual meetings and regional meetings, and Carrie has given a very powerful talk there. I've given a couple of talks about SPP. So even though we might think of SPP as separate from our actual professional identity in terms of the mainstream, we can also make the effort to take SPP to those mainstream locations and share them with other people.
So, I'm sorry, Jill,
Can I just add a quick
Yeah,
thing? I
please,
just wanted to
absolutely.
say that I think also part of developing partnerships is being willing to give it some time. And, you know, one of the things that I felt from like September to now is that there was a lot of intention on us developing these strong partnerships. And I think it's a continuing conversation until it actually, you know, comes together. And so giving it a little bit of space and time for that to happen. When we wrote our second action plan for this workshop, I wrote it specifically so that it could be utilized also to inform any potential partners of what it is that we were doing. That gave them a quick snapshot of both the SPP. I took it straight off the website, you know, a couple paragraphs, this is what it is, and also then describing what it was that we were doing so that people would, you know, that's a good introduction basically to our project for a conversation. And I've found that that's a very useful tool with the most recent conversations that I've had.
So both Jill and Leah have talked about something that I'd like to really use our last 12 or 13 minutes to talk about, which is they were able to use materials and existing resources from SPP to move their action planning forward. And so we now have this amazing handbook. There are lots of tools and resources that have been offered up by SPP. I'm wondering, are there other things or additional pieces that would have been or would be helpful to your teams to move your action planning to the next level? And I'd really like to have a conversation about that from anyone. Please.
I mean, I'll just start by saying that the SPP stuff is so incredibly helpful. I mean, we modeled our program off of SPP initially, and that was, you know, the inspiration really for how we got in the first place. I think it was an article in Audubon that my former boss read, and she was like, "Well, we got to do this here." So that's kind of how it happened. Was at a dentist office or something like that. And the other great thing about it too is you could point when you're talking to your administrators. It doesn't seem like such a crazy idea when the state DOC of Washington, you know, one of the largest states in the country, has you know embraced this idea. So you're not on the fringe. You're actually kind of following someone else's footpath. So that's really helpful. But I think additional materials that could be really useful would be some of that cost-benefit stuff. Just some of those financial success stories that we could look at and say, you know what, they did this and they did this downstream sorting thing, and they got this much of a return on investment. So I think that stuff would be really useful in making the case.
And I think that's key, yeah. So if you see those positive benefit, cost benefit type things, and then you can take those and, I'm sorry, they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Well, I completely am imitating everybody here. So I'm taking all of your ideas back, and we're trying to replicate them in our system, because there are successes that we've seen here that we're bringing back and applying within our jail project, and taking those positive experiences you've had and taking those back, and we're able to show some of that cost effectiveness, and it's really been helpful for us to be able to go back with those numbers, and as a result, we'll have a downstream sorting here in a couple months. So.
Leah?
One of the things Jenny and I had talked about with the online network that we think would be really helpful, and this could be down the road, but having almost a dashboard where everyone who's a member of SPP can input their evaluation statistics, so that we can compare, how are our recycling efforts comparing to Washington, and how many endangered species are we raising, and what programs are working, and having a place where all of that data is in one place instead of spread out all over the country, and we're looking at the same metrics. I think that would be really, really valuable. Even if it, you talk about funding down the road, we'd have a way to look at, place to have the data.
Jocelyn, do you want to talk about that?
Sounds good.
Okay. She had the mic, so I thought I'd ask.
I'll just add that
so that we're also gathering the same types of data. Do you want to talk about that,
yeah,
Terry,
so
please?
As we have our evaluations, I'm sorry, I'm losing all my words because I've been using them so much. Our panel on evaluation later today, we really should talk about creating tools that are useful for all of us, because all of a sudden our sample size will go from Brittany's 300 to 30,000, and then we're addressing these questions about how this type of programming influences recidivism and inmate attitudes and violence in prisons at a national scale. I mean, that's where the big funding may potentially come from. So I think because we're just now starting to evaluate our programs, and we're working with Vera, and we have Utah here with science education, I think we should really capitalize on our ability to create tools that will be widely applicable for all of us, because we should not all be creating our own evaluation tools. And the central data collection, that's really, really great. We should, I don't know how, we might need some computer scientists or something. But.
So we're obviously just starting, and we're going to be doing research, like primary research with the inmates. And one concern I have is QA/QC, so quality assurance and quality control with the data. And I don't know if there's been an effort to try and get at this, or what tools are available, because we're dealing with a fundamentally different type of technician than an undergraduate student.
They're actually amazing, and they're better than students often. And they're inmate technicians, for whatever reason, in our experiences, are terrific data recorders.
So that doesn't happen by itself.
No, they get a lot of training, and I love our students. I don't take a moment to plug our students, because honestly, all of you who think you're familiar with SPP, I think you wouldn't know anything about SPP if it weren't for our student staff. We couldn't do anything that we do without them. I encourage you all to find students.
So do I, because I really like my job. One way to do QA/QC with inmates is to have graduate students who are going out to the prison or to the jail facility on a regular basis and answering questions and giving them training and checking up to make sure that the data sheets look good and that sort of thing. You want to add anything? Also, evaluations, please, let's do that. Let's do that common spreadsheet with all of our information.
I think Adrian can actually speak to QA/QC. Was I talking to you? Or maybe, who was I talking to about, it's not the Strawberry Project?
I haven't heard that.
It was.
We partnered with UC Davis Extension Program. Dr. Surendra Dara decided he'll give us a try. So what he said is, I'm going to give you guys a project I already know the results on. So he's testing us first to see how we collect data. And then in his report, he's going to say, oh, these guys are actually a legitimate source. So he's going to test us with, he already has a second project. He wants us to do tomatoes next, but he wants to make sure that we're collecting data properly. Where's that form? We just, even the format of how to collect the data, we went through different little scenarios, and he picked one that he preferred, and it was easy for the inmate to fill out. And,
Here it is.
oh yeah, there it is. That's the one he picked. So that's it. It's very simple. We just have the pictures of the ratings of the quality of the strawberries. And then on the comment sheet, as soon as bugs start to appear, this happens to be a biopesticide that he already knows the results on. And he's going to compare this data with the data that he has already to see, you know, how it is. So that's how.
So to a non-science person, that looks fairly. It doesn't appear particularly complex,
Right.
right?
No, right. He wants us to rate the plants on a scale of 1 to 5, and we have little images of what 1 to 5 means. The same to inmates, review the plants. The issue that we had with this data collection is security. That's my big thing right now. Working with the facility itself, we have BIA at the top and the middle top, and almost at the captain level, but right down there at the
line staff.
Oh, yeah, that's my struggle right now.
How many of you have experienced challenges in this same way that Adrian's talking about? Just show of hands. Oh,
it's the line staff for security, for example. I'll take things like this. These are real things. I'll take the 5 guys or 6 guys to go work at the garden. On our way to the garden, because you have to pass through 3 little compounds to get there, there's comments made like, what are you guys going to do with the vegetables? And that's our taxpayers' dollars going, you guys are going to eat organic. I don't even get to eat organic. You know, things like that.
So this is coming from the line staff.
It comes from the line staff. And it comes, Captain once said to me, he goes, this isn't beneficial, teaching them a bunch of gardening skills. We need to teach them job skills. You know, so you see, just frustrating. So you get all the top support's there. Everybody
Right.
loves it.
So
It's just when
again,
it gets to the
Dan,
bottom.
Betty, I mean, you're the top support, right? You are in the process of developing a lot of these projects. So could either of you talk about how, again, getting back to that culture change issue, how do you begin to address that with frontline staff?
Education, that is the key, and as we were saying earlier, we're in the initial stage, and I can easily tell the inmate, this is what we're going to do. But it's getting the buy-in from the staff, and I like what one of the other states are doing is giving incentives to the staff. If you know, some of the proceeds from the cost savings will come back into at least a small percent, but you can see that it's being spent on the staff, and that's how we're going to try to get the buy-in from the online staff.
And can you give one of the examples that I think we talked about, so how you're reinvesting that in something that benefits the staff?
Well, I have a request for a podium to be put in the yard, in the recreation yard, so that the staff can better be elevated, so they can better observe the inmate population when they're out in the recreation yard.
Okay.
We had some tiny little successes that we had when we brought our harvest back. We're actually, because the garden's at one end of the compound, so we have to go through the whole compound to get through. So we have baskets of, you know, vegetables and fruit. On one of the times when we harvested and we went through the compound, one of the deputies said, "Oh, can I have one of the cantaloupes?" And I thought, well, you know, why not? So went and went to the kitchen, carved it out, and brought it back to him. So I have one happy deputy now. If I could do that for all of them, you know. You know.
Great one, and you will be our last.
Oh.
See, now this time, Paul, he will be our last comment.
Right.
Please.
I just want to say that in the build-up to our official launch of our SJP project, we had during briefing every day, we came up with a number of initiatives that we adopted that were based on line staff's suggestion. So a lot of the good ideas came from line staff, like the pen idea came from line staff, the string idea came from line staff. And so what we did was we just came up with little quick narratives that were read at the briefing each day, and could go out in the newsletter about how staff had contributed ideas. So I think that way it didn't seem like, hey, this is a bunch of greenies, coming in. It's actually these are common sense ideas that are getting picked up through this avenue of the sustainability team.
And again, push that savings, cost savings, that it's helping preserve jobs, it's helping, you know, so those kinds of things and that messaging. It's definitely a culture change for them, and it's going to take a while to do that. It's not an overnight process, and we're still working on it. So.
Yeah, Steve gets more crap than anybody else.
So, but that continues, so that's a continual process.
Great, thanks, Steve. I'm sorry,
Just
Adrian.
real quick.
Yeah, please.
One of the things that helped for us is we moved who got the recycling money. So originally, the recycling money went to the department. Well, you know, who's that? It's the department. The department's huge, you know, we're big. So we moved that little budget down to the unit. Oh, that's helped so much, because now they get to spend it to beautify PDC and to make, it can't be spent on, you know, barbecues and, you know, fundraising. It has to be spent on the betterment of the facility, but that's really helped a lot support the program.
Thank you, Adrian. Dan, one last.
I think it's a tough one. That's what I would say right off the top, is it's a tough battle. And you do convert line staff, and they do get it. But there's always new line staff, and we're really only as good as the last inning played. I mean, the last fight they see, the last problem they see, the last contraband issue. I mean, it's a recurrent issue that comes up over and over again. So one way for me is I always try and anchor things back to violence. I mean, I'm really active in reporting violence on a monthly basis, actually with a fairly comprehensive report. So I try and show statistics around violence, both as it relates to inmates involved in programs and specifically as it relates to certain programs. So, and then think about models too. It's like Stafford Creek Correction Center is a 2,000-bed medium custody facility, large prison in Washington State that we really have inundated with programs. So whether it's canine, whether it's endangered prairie plant restoration, bicycle repair, garbage sorting center, composting, they're going to do Roots of Success. Is that what I can also show at an aggregate level to the superintendent crowd as a group is that for whatever reason, that facility at a 2,000-bed level is by far the least violent in our system and the most cost-effective in our system, just at the aggregate. I mean, it performs very, very well. So how do you tie that like down to a correctional officer level? So one example is, and this is just it takes time, but I publish a message every week to everybody that works in prison. So I send an email out to 6,000 people every week, and I highlight things that are going on in the department. A lot of them anchor back to violence reduction or new initiatives, and I talked about Roots of Success last week. So how do you continue to remind them or anchor that to that activity is good, activity reduces negative behavior, that being more efficient will save you on the bottom line and somehow anchor it? I think you look for symbolic things too. Believe it or not, I'll almost guarantee you with that toilet paper, inmates complain about it. They will, and then so it creates an interaction. Why do we have brown toilet paper? Why can't we have the other toilet paper? And it creates an interaction around cost efficiency and cost effectiveness. Another thing we did a few years ago, and it's really not an initiative, but it is that we started watching our offender clothing in 12 different prisons, and they all have different standards around usability and lifespan in offender clothing. So in a very draconian sort of way, in a very dictator sort of way, I said nobody can throw away clothing. We're going to send it all back to the Washington Correction Center, the reception center. We're going to have one group sort clothing and determine usability, and we're going to employ inmates to repair it. So our goal was things will be clean and in good repair. You don't get new, okay? Clean and in good repair. So I think about 50% of the clothing we issue now is used. And so line staff see that and they anchor it to money and they anchor it to an efficiency, and it's symbolic of the fact that you're trying to recycle, reuse, repurpose, right? So what can you do that's symbolic that relates to line staff where they see, okay, that kind of makes sense. You know, we're going to put a patch on that pair of pants, we're not going to give you a new one. Or we're going to buy this toilet paper because it's highly cost effective. Or we're not going to give you a cup you can throw away, we're going to make you wash it. You know, because it saves us money. So how do you anchor that to any deliverable that they value? So not new clothing used, not a throwaway item, something you got to repurpose, something that increases my safety, something that provides a benefit to the community. But when you're dealing with massive thousands and thousands of staff members, there's always naysayers in the group. And to a certain degree, it's like on the negative blogs and stuff that will come out on some press articles. Largely, I'll ignore them unless they get pesky enough where I have to answer them.
Okay, we're going to bring this conversation to a close. Please help me in thanking our very inspired panelists. Thank you all very much. Nalini and I are just going to take a few minutes to talk with you about some of the work that we'll be doing tomorrow around values.